And I remember his mom came in and she wasn't told yet. And the doctor told her, and just what a primal scream that came out of her of losing her son. Just the total, like, just I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
Hey, Johnny. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Shane. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad to have a corpsman on the show. I think it's an interesting career. Can you, for the audience, and can you tell us what a corpsman is and why does everybody mispronounce it?
Yeah, sometimes you get the corpsman. Yeah, it's hospital corpsman. And hospital corpsmen are the medics, basically the Army medics. Army has medics. I think Air Force has medics. Um, and for the Navy, it's hospital corpsmen. Basically, we provide all the boots on the ground medical for Navy personnel and the Marines, because not everybody knows this. The Marines are actually a department of the Navy. So often hospital corpsman and are stationed on Marine bases because we provide all their medical. Some work in hospitals all the way up to like labs. Also, you're working in clinics doing emergency medicine. It really, and then combat medicine too. So it just really depends on what unit you're stationed with, and like how, if you want to specialize in a certain particular area.
Okay. So what, I guess I would ask, how did you get started and what made you decide to become a Navy corpsman?
It was just dumb luck. I wanted to get out of my house growing up, and my stepdad was like, the military might be a good way for you to get out of here. And I was like, you know what? And I was really against it initially. I'd been contacted by I want to say it was a Navy recruiter, and I was like, "Don't ever call my house again." Sorry if you cuss on this or not, but I
It's
was
fine.
pissed. And then I went and talked to the Coast Guard first. This was like several months later. Went and talked to the Coast Guard, and I naively and dumbly told them I used to get nosebleeds as a kid, like all the
Mhm.
time, really heavy nosebleeds. And I accidentally told them that, and they're like, "Not, nope." And I was like, "Damn it!" And then like 2 hours later, the same Navy recruiter called me and he was like, "Hey, you want to talk?" And I was like, "Sure." I knew I was going to do Marines and I knew I wasn't going to do Army. Ironically, because I didn't want to be shot at. And then wasn't until later when I was in as a hospital corpsman that I found out, oh, you have a high chance of being deployed with Marines if there's a combat situation. So yeah, and then I took the ASVAB test, and I tested really high in certain areas that they offered me a nuclear technician, which I was like, nope, because it was going to be like a 6 year enlistment. And you were going to be either on an aircraft carrier or a submarine. There was like no way around that. And I didn't want to do that. Boiler technician, which is basically working in the ship, on the engine of the ships. I was like, nope, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that.
I
And
know a guy that did that and he said he went months without seeing the sun. He said he was
yeah,
at the bottom of the ship. I'm like,
yep.
Jesus, that's terrible.
Yeah, and if something happens to the ship, you're done. Like, if those ships, when it's lights out, you can't see your hand in front of your face. So,
Right.
and if you don't have the route out to daylight memorized, there's no getting out. Yeah, and then hospital corpsman was also one of those, and that seemed, all the rest, they give out ranks and huge bonuses to enlist, and I was like, no, there's a reason why they're if they're giving you high ranks and money to, like, tens of thousands of dollars to enlist. There's a reason why. So I chose hospital corpsman, just kind of on a whim, or not on a whim, but just kind of out of all those, that seemed the best. And yeah, and then went to boot camp, and then went to A school.
Okay. So you're saying if you get a good ASVAB score, then corpsman may be an option
Well, there's no
for
good
you.
or bad. That's not entirely correct. There's not necessarily a fail or pass as ASVAB test. It's identifying what are your strengths and your weaknesses, and that's where that's what that ASVAB does. It says you will probably be good in these different areas of the military.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So, can you tell us essentially what kind of education or training you went through once it was decided you were going to
Oh
be a
yeah.
corpsman?
So after boot camp, we went to Hospital Corpsman School. Used to be in San Diego. It's now confined. I think all the different Army, Air Force, and Navy all have one big training center, and I believe in Texas now. But I was sent to Hospital Corpsman School in San Diego. It was right at Balboa Hospital, and we were there for God 4 or 5 months. It was basically like 2 years of school crammed into 4 or 5 months,
Was there a big
something like
washout
that.
rate, or did most of
Yeah,
them make
they
it?
give you two. At least when I this was 30 something years ago, you could fail two, and if you like two, they weren't tests per se, but you had to show what you would do in this situation. And if
Like a practical
yeah,
exam?
thanks. And if you
Okay.
failed two of those, you got sent back to a class several weeks behind, and you kind of had to learn that
Kind of
modality
restart.
all over again. And that happened to one of my friends in my class. He didn't he failed something. I forget what it was. And we used to joke after we got stationed together, and afterwards we're like, dude, we should have just kept failing until until they were like, hey, this is it. And then you're just gonna be a seaman or airman or a fireman. Because I was like, dude, that was corpsman school was so much fun. I was like, we should have just done that and then
Yeah.
picked a command. But
So what when you said a practical exam, so what do you remember, like anything they had you doing in that?
oh yeah, so we had to do intubations, uh, both like in a hospital setting, and then they showed us like how to, if I'm remembering, I think we had to do emergency ones, like a
Tracheotomy?
trachea,
Okay.
um, assessments for like if someone was just down and you didn't know what was going on, things to look for. IVs, we had to do IVs on each other. And then there was like the regular stuff like nurses do where it's figuring out drip rates for IVs and like medication dosages based on weights and stuff like that, and infant versus adult or a child. I was so long ago, I don't remember all of it.
Okay. Okay. So if you had to say what this career path would be for, like who would it not be for? Or is there a type of person that does well as a corpsman,
Yeah,
you think?
so if you're squeamish, you shouldn't. You like if you don't like blood or seeing people ill or sick or
So you were
dying.
cool with all that.
I found out I was. I didn't know until I was in. And
I guess you
then
don't know till you do it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you can't handle emergencies well, it's not probably a good field for you. Some people we saw this when we were in. Some people just freeze up and panic. Not panic, I should say, but they freeze up.
I've seen that when I teach air traffic control.
Oh,
It,
I'm sure, yeah.
it's not as often as you would think, but every now and then you get someone and there's the airplanes and they're talking and all of a sudden they're just sitting there and you're going, "Hey, you all right, man? Are you going to
Yeah.
do something? Like, come on, let's go." And
Well,
they're gone. Like, it's weird.
it happens to everyone to a degree. Like I remember the first emergency call I got called on, and I was the responding EMT, and it was a little girl on base housing who had split her knee all the way to like the kneecap. You could see the kneecap, and and I and there was all the kids because they were trying to they had hung a tether ball on a stop sign, and the girl was on a step stool and she fell on the edge. It was like a knife when she fell and it just split her knee open. So all the kids and the family were standing around, all the kids and parents were standing around her. And then we got there in the ambulance and they separated. And when I saw the knee and I was just all, I just like, what do I do? I like my brain went blank, and then the driver who had more experience than me, he like nudged me. He's like, "You're up," and I was like, "Oh, thanks." And then I just went into my training, you know.
Okay.
So I
All
froze for
right.
like a good 3 seconds. I was just like, "What do I do?"
Yeah, I don't know if I can handle seeing all that. That's rough. Okay, let's talk about. So I know that after you did, I don't want to move completely past being a corpsman in the military, but after you did go into the civilian realm.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, and what was that
I was gonna say I
exactly?
worked in the hospital field for a good 15, 16 years after I got out.
What would that job title be?
Oh, well, I floated around. Like I was ER tech initially, and then I did some like administrative stuff, and then I worked in labs. I worked at Planned Parenthood. You name it. I worked with medical imaging, not as like a tech, but just like as an assistant with that. And so you name it in the medical field, I've probably done something with it.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just trying to envision the process. So let's say I'm a corpsman. I do 4 years in the military, what have you, and I get out. I have a shot at doing. Would you say ER tech would be the first thing?
If it depends.
Okay.
So on Camp Pendleton, all the hospital corpsmen that worked at the clinics, there was the hospital, the main hospital, and then there was the each camp had its own clinic, and we were all required to do. If you were a clinic corpsman, you were required to have an EMT license. So I had that, and I had an EMT. Back then, it was EMT/D because we were trained to use defibrillators. This was before. Now they're just automatic. You just put it on the person, and it tells you what to. Anybody can use them, but back then you had to be licensed to and was certified to use them. So that helped me with getting a job in the civilian world because I had this special training. But if you were in still, or if you're thinking about going in, or you have a child that's in and they're a hospital corpsman, I would say get certified in something, be an X-ray tech, a lab technician, a
Is it
respiratory tech.
is it possible to get, but besides the EMT certification, is it possible while you're in the military that the military could get you some of those certifications or not?
You kind of have to um, be your own advocate for that. Say, hey, I want to go to pharmacy school, and then they'll
Okay.
send you to that. But it's like pharmacy tech. You're not a pharmacist. You're not a pharmacist. You would have to go back to school to be which you could. I mean, you could say, I want to go back to school to be a pharmacist, and then see if there's like an officer, program that'll cover that. But, um, or if you became an independent duty corpsman, which a friend of mine did, he became an independent duty corpsman, which is what physician's assistants came out of in the civilian world. That came out of independent duty corpsman because there wasn't enough doctors to be stationed on every ship and submarine, and so independent duty corpsmen were not quite a doctor, not quite a nurse. They're that in between. And he did that, and then he was independent duty corpsman on a submarine for a while, and then went back to school. They sent him back to school to become a physician's assistant, and then he became an officer. So he went from like E6 to an O3, I think he was. So
Okay.
so those
Okay.
are options are there, but you have to advocate for yourself and ask.
Okay.
But if you just go to be a corpsman and then get out, there's not you could be a phlebotomist.
So you kind of got
Yeah.
to set yourself up. Just you have to be
Yeah.
proactive,
Yeah.
right? While you're
Yeah.
in the military. All right, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Take advantage of the situation,
Yep.
I know I did. That's how I learned air traffic control. I went in, teach me. I did my 4 years and I got the hell out of there, you know. And then I took the GI Bill obviously too and
Nice.
used that later. The
Yeah.
GI Bill is fantastic. If I don't know anybody's
Yeah.
listening, if they say you should take the GI Bill and some people don't, it blows my
I
mind.
know.
It's literally practically free money.
There was a couple kids when we were in boot camp, like first day there, and they're like, "Did you sign up for your GI Bill?" And I was like, "Yeah, I already got it." And these other kids were like, "No, I don't want it." And they're like, back then, I don't know what it was is now, but back then it was like $10,000, $15,000. And they're like, "You don't want this?" And they're like, "No." Okay. They would, okay, well, sign right here, and you're saying you don't want the GI Bill.
Crazy.
So
It's
yeah, I
crazy.
just signed up. Actually, I just started the process for the Veterans Rehab and Education Program. It's fairly new, where if you're fresh out or you've been out for a while, you can get qualified to go. They'll send you back to school. They'll pay for a bunch of stuff. So I just started that process. I think it's called VRE.
That's interesting you say that because I just got approved for that in the state of Illinois. So essentially, it's a state program. And if you leave Illinois and you go in the military and then you come back to Illinois, and it doesn't even matter how many years later, obviously for me, it was quite a while ago. I said, I'll put in the paperwork and they say, okay, pick any state school, it's paid for.
Nice.
I mean,
I
it's
know
just done.
Texas has some programs like that. California doesn't. I'm shocked California doesn't have veteran programs like that, but I know Texas does too. There was a couple guys I was in hospital corpsman school with. They're like, yes, and they're like, I got my GI Bill, but I'm going to use that to pay for rent. And when I go back to Texas, I can go to any school for free. I was like, oh, that's cool. Good for you. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a VA program that's, I believe it's called VRE, that vets, doesn't matter how long you've been out, you can, it's not a guarantee you'll get it, but you can, there's high odds if you go through these training programs and meetings that you'll get it.
Okay. So you did your military medical training. Eventually you move into doing civilian.
Mhm.
Was there a difference between, did your training set you up properly for that? Was there a difference in the real world, but how things are handled, or
Yeah.
how did that
Yeah. I
go
mean,
down?
the biggest difference is priority. So in a combat situation, the less injured you are, the higher priority you are, because they want to get you back out onto the field. So if you're close to dying in the military, like in a combat situation, if you're close to dying, you have less priority. It's reverse in civilian world. The closer you are to dying in the civilian world, the more attention and medical expertise you're going to get.
I did
The
not
less
know that.
injured
That
you
is,
are, the longer the delay will be to get the help you need. So that I knew that. That's like a big separation between military, and it doesn't mean like that's what happens in a military hospital, but in a combat situation, that's how the priorities change. That was one. And then the biggest one is, I had done so much in the military, and then when I got out, I was really confined to what I could do. Just because civilian world, you have to have so many licenses and all this other stuff, whereas in the military, it's, once you're trained on it, it's kind of like you're in, you can just go do it.
right.
So that was a big
Okay.
glaring difference. Yeah.
So tell us about your time in the military, doing the job as a corpsman. Did you have to treat anybody at any time? Like, did you go anywhere? Give us just a idea of what
Yeah.
it was like.
Well, the best part of it was the lifelong friends I made. I'm still friends with most of those people I served, and some of their significant others, and couples that were together back then that are no longer. We're still friends with their exes. And like, I just turned 50 a couple weeks ago, and almost everybody in our group of friends came up to where I live for like this big semi-surprise party that my girlfriend
Very
and
cool.
my family put on for me. So that's the best part of that, was these like lifelong deep friendships that I've made. The other part of it was, yeah, I definitely saw things in the military. A lot of times at our clinic, the clinic I was assigned to was where on the West Coast, where the Marines go through boot camp, just their field training. So there's MCRD, which is down in San Diego proper, and then they come up to Camp Pendleton to fire their rifles and do all their like hikes and the humps, like with all their stuff on. So we treated everything: broken legs, broken feet, ingrown toenails, weird stuff, like a recruit that had a thrombose hemorrhoid, which looks like a cherry, basically a vein, a thrombose vein was coming out of this kid's anus, and he had to his 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 drill instructor, I forget, it's drill instructor and drill sergeant. One's the Navy, one's the Army, one's the Marines, and I don't remember. And a Marine would get pissed at me for not knowing that, but basically told this kid, put all your gear on and walk over to the clinic. So we're getting, me and the other guy have ambulance duty that day. Everyone else has left the clinic and we're on ambulance duty that day, and we're checking the rig, making sure everything's ready in case we get called out. And I hear him go, "What the hell?" And he's like, "What is that kid doing?" And I turn around and look, and this kid was walking bent over at a 45-degree angle with all of his stuff on his back and kind of waddling. And so we get the gurney out, the clinic gurney, and we roll it down to like where this kid is. And we're like, and Marine recruits have to refer themselves in the third person. They don't say I or me. They say this recruit. And I was like, so we walk up and we're like, "Hey kid, what's going on?" He's like, "This recruit has something coming out of his butt." And we're like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, this recruit has something coming out of his butt." And we're like, "Well, why don't you get on the gurney?" And he's like, "No, this recruit was ordered by his drill instructor to walk over here." And I was like, "Okay, medical precedents, we can override what your drill instructor says. So get on the gurney." He's like, "No, this recruit's going to walk the rest of the distance." And we're like, "Kid, are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay." So we rolled the gurney, and it took him 20 minutes to walk like 15, 20 feet because he was waddling so slow. So long story short, he pulls his pants down, and this literally looks like a red jawbreaker's hanging out of this kid's butt. And we're like, call the main site clinic, and they're tell him what's happening. And they're like, he needs to come in right away and have surgery. And we're like, okay, like that, if that ruptures, he could die. And we're like, all right. So we call out and sirens and drove, lights and sirens, and drove him over to the main site clinic. So stuff like that. Definitely, I mean, had a kid die on me in a car accident, pretty bad car accident, which I that's all I can say about it. It's still this poor kid. I have a
It was
hard time
on,
talking to this day. I still do, but like,
it was on base that he had the
yeah,
accident, or?
a lady went. It was a curved part of a road, and this lady tried to go around on the blind side and just went into the opposite lane and just smashed his car. And like jacked him up bad, and he was sitting there talking to us, and then he knew he was dying, and the dash was like acting as a tourniquet. When the fire department pulled it off his legs, his legs ballooned. It was like helium balloons on his upper legs, and like just the poor kid was like sitting there talking to his sergeant. Showed up, and he was uh asking us, tell my wife I love her. And he was young. I mean, I thought he was old, because I was 19 or 20. He was maybe 26. And I just thought that's, I thought he was an adult, and that's just a kid. And like, yeah, and he just died right there. Like, I mean, they had med flight come in, but he was out. He was gone. Yeah, poor kid. But
That's sad. That's rough.
yeah, I mean, yeah. And then just I worked in the base ER for a little while. I mean, military bases are dangerous. People don't realize how dangerous they are. And like a big giant troop transport rolled over on this guy, and like skin off of his arm. It was just like hanging in a flap. And yeah, that's no joke. Those military bases they're dangerous, especially like the Marine kind of bases. Like those things are not safe.
Wow.
So
Wow.
But yeah, so we saw everything. I managed our pharmacy and our clinic for a little while. You name it, we did it there. Minor surgeries, we did minor surgeries like ingrown toenails, cysts, stuff like that. We were allowed to do those. We just had to have the independent duty corpsman that was in charge of our clinic, or one of the two civilian doctors that were there. They had to sign off on it.
And so if a prescription needed to be filled, the doctor would sign off on it?
We
Or
wrote
did
them
you
sometimes. So
really?
we would write like, "Hey, you get 800." Joke is, I don't know how it was for you, but for Marines and corpsmen stationed on Marine bases, the joke is 800 milligrams of Motrin will fix anything. That's so we could write stuff like that, like guaifenesin. There was they're called pearls. We call them pearls. They're little gold balls. So if you had a sore throat or unproductive cough, we could write the prescription for that, and we could fill it just in our clinic, stuff like that. But like we couldn't give you like morphine. Well, we could give it, but we couldn't prescribe it. Like a controlled medicine, we couldn't do that. But in a combat situation, we could give it. So, um,
Now, did you end up getting deployed ever, or did you just stay in
yeah,
San
no, no.
Diego?
So my second command was a fleet surgical team, and we got deployed with the Essex. So we weren't part of the. We weren't. We were assigned to the ship, but we weren't the ship's crew. So when the ship got deployed, we went with it, or anytime it went out to sea, we would go with it. But otherwise, when it was docked, we worked wherever we wanted in San Diego. So I still lived up. All my friends and everybody lived in Camp Pendleton or by Camp Pendleton. So I just continued to work up there. But yeah, we got deployed. I went to I missed the first part of deployment because I was on leave. So I actually went around the entire world. I flew from San Diego to Philly, and then from Philly to Lodge, Spain, and then Spain to Sicily, Sicily to Bahrain, where I was in Bahrain for like 2 weeks waiting for the ship. And then me and several people got helicoptered out to the supply vessel, and we were on that for 3 or 4 days. And it was so nice on the ship. I was like, man, this is because they were the supply ship. So they had everything,
Yeah.
everything. And I was like, man, if this is what it's like being on a ship, this is going to be great. And then, and
What
then
year
we
was this?
97, late 97. And then the supply ship and the Essex pulled up next to each other somewhere in the Indian Ocean. And then we helicoptered over. And then I was on there. We went back into the Persian Gulf, and we were there for 2 months, I think, or a month and a half, something like that. And just docked to the Persian Gulf. And then me and a couple other people went and helped train Kuwaiti medics uh, on some stuff. And then we went back to the ship. We were there for Christmas and New Year's. And then we went to Perth, Australia, then Sydney, and then Hawaii, and then back to San Diego. So I went around literally went around the entire world.
So 97, this was some sort of support then for the leftover of Desert Shield and Desert Storm and everything that went down for that, or?
Yes, kind of. I'm technically a veteran of the first Gulf War because I went in 1994 and they hadn't signed a peace treaty yet. So like that era, we were still technically Gulf War veterans. So yeah, it was I think it was keeping a presence in the area. I also think they knew something was going to happen because when I was on Camp Pendleton, after Marines, I don't know if all Marines do this, but I think a good portion of them do. After they finish boot camp, they go to School of Infantry. At the School of Infantry, which is on Camp Pendleton, where you could see it was literally a mocked up like Arabic city, like a town center kind of place. And because at the time I was the duty, like first couple of months I was on the base, I was the duty driver. So I picked up all the lab. This is how long ago this was. I had to pick up the lab specimens and then bring back the lab results. And so I would pass by this and I would eat my lunch sometimes there and I would watch. And you could see these guys in a line, 5 or 6 Marines clearing this area and then going into a building, coming out on a roof, doing all this stuff. So I think they knew back then even there was going to be another this, this was mid 90s. This was like 94, 90. Yeah, 94. I think they even knew then that there was going to be something happening in the Middle East again.
Yeah, I mean, the Black Hawk Down situation, that was not too long after
That
that, I
was in
think, right?
Somalia though.
Right. So, I mean, could they been training for any type of deployment out there? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but you could tell it was like for desert or like arid urban fighting, not in an open field, not in a forest, not in a
Mhm.
foresty area, not in a hilly area. It was like urban, arid combat.
Interesting. So you said you went down to Perth and Sydney. Did you
Yeah,
stay
yeah, we
there,
got
or
to
is
go to.
this was more of a
This was
this
just
was
on the deployment. We went to Perth, and then on the way up around Perth, they did a huge multinational, multi-naval um, combat scenario for like a week. So it was like us, British Navy, Australian Navy, I want to say Japan's Defense Forces, and somebody else, and we would do combat scenarios, not with each other, but just like how would this play out? And like our team, the fleet surgical team, we were in charge of identifying where injured were and routing them to our ship because our ship had the biggest, because of the fleet surgical team that was on there, we handled all the severe injuries that like a corpsman couldn't handle on a smaller ship. So then like we would go to the me and a couple of the other guys had to get not top secret, super secret clearance, whatever is below top secret, to go into the CDC or whatever it's called, like the brains of the ship. We'd have to have clearance to go in there, and then we had these books, this big binder of like code. So we would have to go down and be like Purple Delta Beta 33, and that would mean whatever ship has 2 injured on it and en route to us. So we had to use all these codes. So we'd have to sit there. They'd be giving us these things. You'd be like, shit. So you'd have to, one of us would be writing it all down and the other one would be like, oh, let me find this in the book. Cause you had to do it. And like, we'd get timed on it. You had to figure all this information out. And then we'd have to relay it to the officer, one of the surgeons that was with us. So that's what we did. And then like, this was the best thing. Some Australian sailors, medics, like their version of hospital corpsman came onto our ship, and there was this big dude. He was big guy. He was like 6'3", 6'4", big beard. I guess they can grow beards. And they at the time we still wore dungarees, so it was like those. The Navy has the worst uniforms. These like jean style bell bottom pants, and then this like blue shirt. It looks like prison blues. Well, they wore these like zip up jumpsuits. And so one of our female officers, one of the doctors, was like, I'll show you guys, both the Australians and you guys, the corpsmen, how to do a proper knee exam. And we're like, all right, cool. Because we were also learning how to do amputations, emergency amputations in case someone stepped on a landmine. Because at that time there was still, I mean, I'm sure there still are. There was tons of unexploded, unknown ordnances, landmines around Kuwait from both sides of Kuwait and Iraq, putting those in combat zones. So like there was still emergency amputations happening. So she was showing us that, like how to examine the knee, and then we were seeing how to do emergency amputations, which are sickening. It'll give you the chills seeing one. But so he pulled his pant leg up and she's like, oh no, I need you to pull your pant leg up higher. Can you do that? He's like, no. And she's like, well, are you wearing anything underneath that? Like, are you comfortable? He's like, yeah, I've got a t-shirt and underwear on. She's like, if you're comfortable with that, he's like, okay. So he unzips and pulls this down, and he's got a white t-shirt on, kind of like I'm wearing a black t-shirt, white t-shirt, just a regular t-shirt. And then he's got tiny little red Speedos on. And we all just started cracking up laughing. I'm like, was this a setup? Did he know? Like, did they, like, there's no way he knew that this was going to happen. Like, I was like, this is just this guy's regular underwear.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good, it was.
So you go over to, so you leave Perth, you go over to Sydney, do anything over there, and
Oh, yeah. We had,
keep going?
I was told take leave in Sydney by the guys who had been deployed before. And I wish I had taken more leave in Perth versus Sydney. Perth is a really cool little town. So the people in Perth were so nice to us. I remember me and four of my friends were at a table, and this older, I mean, at the time, he was probably a kid or maybe even a young teenager. Maybe he served in World War II. Older guy, like that generation, probably born in the 20s or around there, came up to us, and he was just like, next round of beers on me. I just want to say thank you to the U.S. military, because if it wasn't for you, this is his words, not mine. He said, if it wasn't for you guys, we'd all be speaking Japanese. And I was like, I wasn't even born yet. Like, I had nothing to do with that. Yeah, we all said something like that. And he's like, no. We owe the U.S. military a lot. So I just want to say thank you. I was like, all right. So he bought us drinks. And then another time, me and two other friends were walking somewhere in Perth, and this couple stopped us, and they're like, don't go down that alley. Don't go down this street. Don't go down this street, because they're waiting to roll you guys. There's guys in the bars or waiting in off the side streets. And when you go down there, they're gonna jump you guys. There's like enough to jump 3 or 4 of you. We're like, okay, thanks. So
Do they say why?
they're just criminals who are looking to take advantage of drunk military.
Okay, so really just rob
just,
you then.
Yeah,
Much.
yeah.
Okay.
Beat us up, rob us, whatever.
Okay.
But otherwise, like, there was families that met service people at the docks when we got off the ship, and were like, come to our house, you can stay with us, and we'll make you meals. You can stay here while you're here in Perth if you want, or go to the hotels, whatever you want. And the girls were all super. That was a really good time. The girls all wanted to go party and have a good time with us, so that was a lot of fun. And then we went around to Sydney and naively thought it was going to be the same thing. In fact, a representative, like their tourism representative, came on board the ship while we were out at sea in between Perth and Sydney, and she was asking people like, where do you want to go? So me and my friends were like, we just want to be close to the bars and like maybe like a fun area, maybe some nightlife. And she took that to mean prostitutes, red light, that kind of stuff. And so they, at the time, it's King's Cross. And I've since, one of my neighbors was Australian, and she's like, yeah, it used to be that way. It's not that way anymore. It was like the red light district. And so yeah, Sydney was complete opposite. Every single night it was like, what is this? What is going on? Like, some hilarious stuff happened there, like eye-opening and hilarious, and just, yeah. But it was fun.
Very cool. Very cool.
And that was the good thing about being in the military, if nothing else, is I got to go to all these places I would never have gone as a young man. Like, I would have never gone to Sydney. I would have never gone to the Middle East. I wouldn't have been able to live. I would have never moved to San Diego just on my own. And I got, I was really, I've talked about this with my friends when we were all up here. It's like, we lived on the beach as 19-year-old kids. We lived on the beach and had zero responsibilities. I was like, we were so lucky. Like, kids these days, it's too expensive. Like, I think I made maybe $600 a month, maybe $650, somewhere in there. And I was able to have a car payment, live off base, go do
Yeah.
fun stuff all the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
these poor
I feel
kids
like
these days.
I mean, I agree. It sounds like we're turned into an advertisement for going in the military, but the fact of the matter is you're right. It is one of the biggest perks is being able to go and see things you're never going to see otherwise, unless you're wealthy, obviously.
There's plenty of drawbacks. Like, I don't think the military is good for mentorship. I don't think it's good for recognizing when someone's dealing with mental health issues or needs guidance and that kind of stuff. I think the military is horrible for that. But there's other things that can be beneficial to join the military, and then there's things that I think are really terrible about joining the military.
Take the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so after you wrap up your tour there, ultimately you end up going into civilian work, and you want to talk briefly about some of the things that you saw there?
But yeah, so I worked at a hospital in Los Angeles that was like kind of in between two gang areas. And there was one time I walked. It was an old hospital, and as I round the corner to go into the ER, everyone goes, "He went outside." All the people waiting, they're like, "He went outside. He went outside." I was like, "Whoa, what?" And I'm like carrying my lunch and my jacket. I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Go." He went outside. And as I turned around, I noticed it looked like someone had taken a bucket of blood and just trailed it out the door. I was like, how did I miss this? And so I go walking outside, and this guy's his hand has been chopped so badly. I could see everything inside his hand. It was just open, young kid, and probably late teens or maybe early 20s. And I was like, hey man, what's going on? What are you doing? And he was all tatted up and stuff. And he's like, my ride's right here. I was like, dude, you got to come back inside. I'm like, that's that's bad. And he's like, no man, we got to go. And he's like, I'm going. I'm like, no, hey, you you got to stick around, man. Like, you're gonna lose that hand if or die from it. Like, you're gonna get an infection and die or lose your hand. He's like, nope. And as I was talking to him, his ride pulled up, and he just got in the car, and someone gave him a shirt. He wrapped it around. They took off. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but anytime there's an assault that comes into the ER, like you got beat up, there was a suspicious injury or anything like that, hospitals are mandated reporters, so they have to notify the whatever police or sheriff covers that hospital. So they're like, yeah, he took off as soon as he knew, as soon as he found out we were calling the sheriffs about this, he ran off because he probably has warrants, and they're probably going to go and get revenge right now on the gang that caused this. And we're like, I was like, and we never saw this kid again. I was like, man, what the hell happened to that kid's hand? We used to get ton of alcoholics that lived in the were around there. So one time this guy came in, and the fire brought him in, and I was 4 or 5 feet away from him, and I was like, holy hell, who's wearing all the CK1? And they're like, he drank it. And I was like, what? And he had stolen like a liter bottle. I mean, it was huge, like a display bottle, and drank this whole thing of CK1, and it was coming out of his pores. So anytime, I mean, I don't think anybody wears CK1 anymore, but anytime after that for years, if I smelled CK1, it always brought me back to that guy. And he was a repeat. He was a repeat. Like, he was in and out of there all the time. He'd pass out drunk somewhere, and people, I mean, these are like people who there's they're so far gone, their bodies can't function without alcohol. Um, um, people, sadly, some people like have Medi-Cal, and the ER is their only approved place for treatment. So they'll just go into the ER for the littlest thing. So I mean, that's the thing that clogs up ERs is instead of just Medi-Cal giving them complete coverage, they just give them ER coverage. So we'd see people come in for like the dumbest stuff. And I'm like, we get it. But I was like, I tell them like, you're going to be here for about 8 hours. They come in at like 5 o'clock. We're like, you're probably not going to get seen till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning easily. And
Too
they're
bad
like,
they're
all
not in the
right.
military. They'd be number one.
Yeah. Or like this one lady, I pissed her off. She was from, you could tell they were from a well-to-do part of town, part of probably in Burbank somewhere. And and she came in with her son, and it was like, I don't know, probably like, don't ever go to an ER between like 4 and 11 o'clock, 4 p.m. and 11. They're slammed. And then on weekends, they're even worse. So it was like a Saturday night. She brought her teenage son. He's probably like 13 in. And so she was here because her son had a skin issue. So I'm like, the clerk's like, she keeps coming up. I was like, well, let me see her chart. So I look at the chart, or his chart, and he's got jock itch. And I was like, she brought her kid to the ER for jock itch. And so I go out and I'm like talking to her. I was like, hey, look, this is a low priority. You're better off going tomorrow morning to our urgent care clinic. Don't the ER. He's anytime anything comes in here that's worse than this, he's gonna get bumped again. She's like, so you're gonna make my son wait? And I said, you've already made him wait a week. What's another couple hours? And who's your manager? And I was like, I'll get her out here. Like, she's gonna tell you the same thing. Sure enough, the nurse, the nurse in charge that night was like, because he had been on his chart. I said he'd been dealing with it for like a week or two. She's like, you made your son wait a week instead of just going to the doctor. Why don't you just take him to an urgent care clinic? Fine, I'll go. It's like,
Amazing.
I think she's used to like bougie, you know, Burbank, Hollywood treatment, and was like, you're in the wrong place, lady. We got people, yeah, and like people would get shot with 22s all the time. Once a week, someone would come in shot with a 22, and you're like, and you would think gunshot wound, it's gonna be horrible, and it looks like a little pencil, like they got stabbed with a pencil, and they'd be so calm about it. And then another time, this fire brought in this guy, and he had been in he had mental health issues, and he was in and out of our hospital quite a bit for different things. And he was screaming, like in agony, screaming, just and his arm had this huge bandage on it. And so I asked the fire, I was like, man, he's being really dramatic. Is it a real injury, or is it just a mental health issue? And they're like, no, it's a real injury. And I'm like, what happened? They're like, just wait till you see it, and then we'll tell you what happened. I was like, okay. So I went over with a nurse, and we take the bandage off, and it looked like in a cartoon when Daffy Duck would get his beak erased and he would just have a
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
It was like that on his arm, though. Like his arm, the inside from like where the not all the way down to the pinky, but that side of the arm to the elbow was just flat and gone. It was just gone. And it was like just a bright red wound. And I was like, what the hell happened? He goes, well, he was shacking up with someone's wife, and the guy came home, and he went out the victim went out the window. Well, the guy shot at him with a 45, and he caught him in the arm. And I was like, that's from a 45? And he's like, yeah. He's like, if it had been another inch or over, he probably would have lost his entire arm. I was like, holy hell. I mean, and I remember asking the ER doc on duty that day, I was like, what are they going to do? They're like, nothing. They're going to do a skin graft. There's no muscle or meat there anymore. So they'll just pull some skin off his thigh and smack and put that over there. I was like, holy moly. Um, yeah, so that was that was a shocking one. Um, you know, yeah, other stuff that's not as fun, like I'd seen babies die, and this poor kid, he was in a car accident. He was the passenger, and the another kid was driving um a like a souped up Japanese car at down San Fernando Boulevard, which is a huge industrial road. It goes on for miles, and it's super wide. So a lot of drag racing used to happen. I don't know if I imagine it still does, but it used to be really bad out there. And the driver lost control of the car, and it spun out, and the passenger side hit the telephone pole with such force that when the safety glass shattered, it went through the kid's face like shotgun pellets. It just shredded right side of his face that was facing the window. It just like I remember he was because this poor kid he came in, he was dead. I mean, he died from impact. And I just remember the fire brought him in, and I could see it was like shredded curtains, and I remember I could see through to his like his teeth, and I was like, oh, I'll never ever forget this. The family was there, and his pastor from his church were there. And I remember the pastor, me and the doctor went out. I don't know why the doctor wanted me there. Like, it was above my pay grade, but the doctor wanted me there. And I remember the pastor just saying, this is such a good kid. He works 2 jobs. He helps support his family. He volunteers at our church. He's a really good kid. And the driver took off and just called from a payphone, "Hey, your son was in an accident. You need to call the, whatever the kid's name is." It's like, that's it. Like, such a prick, just such a selfish thing to do. Was like, instead of staying there, he's like, "Hey, we were in an accident. Juan," whatever the kid's name was. Juan was in. He's he's going to be picked up by an ambulance. You need to call around to see which one he's at, and then just took off and ran. And I remember his mom came in and she wasn't told yet, and the doctor told her, and just what a primal scream that came out of her of losing her son. Like just the toll, like, just I'd never seen anything like that in my life. Like, there was a baby who died in the ER one time who had been on life support for a long, like, couldn't breathe on the baby couldn't breathe on its own, and had been in critical care for like 9 months. It was in a care facility, and the parents knew the baby was going to pass, and so they had specific rules, and they brought the baby in that we weren't supposed to resuscitate it, and the parents were there, and I think they had time to grieve. Whereas, like, this mom was just finding out in the moment. And I'll never forget that. Just how she lost it. Like, just yeah, and just I was like 22 at the time, 23, and I was just like, I had no life experience. Like, I didn't have anything in my life like that, and yeah, just to see her, it was, yeah, uh,
That's rough. Okay, well, on that downer of a note, how about you have any final thoughts or advice maybe for anyone who might be thinking of becoming a corpsman or going into the medical field?
yeah. It wasn't for me. I spent a lot of time in the medical field when I should not have. I did it because it was safe, and I could get a job pretty much anywhere doing anything. So, if you're gonna do it, make sure it's something you're really passionate about. The other thing too is like compassion fatigue is real. People burn out in that field, especially in ERs. You run on adrenaline. There's like the juice, like, you're just on that juice for however long your shift is. You can, especially if you work the night shift, like, you're running on adrenaline most nights, and that gets, um, it can be problematic for some people. So just be aware of that. You're going to get a gallows humor because it's the only way you can deal with some of the stuff you'll see and do. Like, that's like emergency medicine, or if you like work in hospice care and stuff like that, where people are actually passing. But there's tons of opportunities in the medical field. It's just make sure it's for you. It wasn't for me. I wasted a lot of time working in a field that I didn't care about. Like, it wasn't my passion. So yeah.
And so now, so you own a Flores podcast productions.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
that
So,
about?
yeah, I help produce. Basically, I do everything but host the podcast for my clients. So I work with a variety of clients, like a couple what are called destination marketing organizations, basically what used to be called a tourism board. I work for a couple of those, and some other indie podcasts. I help run the podcast. So I act as a producer. I'll develop their podcast to align with like marketing goals and mission statements, and then manage all the post production. I sit in on the recording sessions like this and make sure things are going smoothly and the audio is being recorded correctly.
Yeah, you had some
Yeah,
feedback about my audio already.
just trying to help out. Yeah, I do. I also do a lot of workshops and give back to my community. I can't do pro bono work anymore. It's, as you know, running a podcast is a lot of work, and so I can't do pro bono work. But what I do though is I work with community organizations that serve underprivileged people or have like goals and missions that align with like my morals and ethics, and I'll come in and do workshops with their members and basically help them develop a podcast, and then
Yeah,
I'm like, you're off
very
to the
cool.
races. So yeah, I love podcasting. I got into it as a hobby.
Very cool. What,
Yeah,
do you have a way to get a hold of you if someone wanted to use your service?
sure. If they have questions or anything like that, you can just go to Flores Podcast Productions. Just type that in, florespodcastproductions.com, or just type in Flores Podcasts and it'll come up.
I'll try to put that in the show notes too for you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Uh, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Johnny. This has been enlightening for sure. I didn't know anything about corpsman, and I would imagine most of the people that are listening probably don't know it either. I'll be honest, I didn't know. I had to Google essentially, basically what we're going to be talking about, and it's definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of people think of army medics, and that's great. They serve a purpose, but I believe hospital corpsmen are the most Medal of Honor winners because of going into combat situations and all the crap they do in those. Knock on wood, I never had to do that. So, knock
Right.
on wood, I'm too old to do that now, but like I didn't have to do that. My friends and I joke about from the time we were in, it's like, did you notice there was no Persian Gulf Wars when we were in? There's a reason why, and then after we got out, it started again. So we were keeping everybody safe.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, Johnny. Been fantastic. I'm glad you've been on.
I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.